And the recipes for seafood couscous and rose-fragrant baklava are featured in the August issue of the BBC Good Food magazine.
I'll be glad to get this over with.
Questions.
What do you think it is that makes your marriage work?
Dilemmas.
And what does that mean? You each have your own lives?
And answers.
Look, I'm sorry if I'm misunderstanding you. You're not saying, left up to you, you wouldn't adopt at all.
Castles, tonight at 7 on BBC One.
Secret Service returns to BBC One, starting with an undercover investigation at home, setting up the repairmen.
He charged us for replacing the cassette carriage, and basically all he did was put the existing carriage back on its rollers. I could cheat customers every day of the week if I wanted to.
Dylan Winters on the lookout for the rip-off merchants. Secret Service, tomorrow at 7:30 on BBC One.
This is BBC One. Now the news with Hugh Edwards. It's 6 o'clock.
Western military chiefs are meeting in London to discuss the use of force to protect the so-called safe havens in Bosnia. Sarajevo has again been shelled and the Bosnian Serbs are now poised to take Žepa. Iraq frees the 2 Americans jailed 4 months ago for entering the country illegally. And an accident, says Hill, a foolish move, says Schumacher, as they both crash out of the British Grand Prix. Good evening. The United Nations says the Bosnian enclave around Žepa is about to fall. Bosnian Serbs are reported to be closing on the town centre with tanks and massed infantry. The West is now considering a military response. British, French and American chiefs of staff are about to meet in London to consider the latest position. After taking Srebrenica and attacking Žepa, the Serbs are expected to turn next on the big havens Gorazde and then ultimately on the capital Sarajevo itself. From there, our correspondent Jeremy Bowen sent this report.
Front lines have been active all over this country. This was Sarajevo, where it's routine. In Žepa, by all accounts, it's desperate. Government troops have disarmed Ukrainian peacekeepers there and turned their weapons on the Bosnian Serbs. The Ukrainian response was to disable their heavier weapons and armoured vehicles to stop them falling into Bosnian hands, but the Serbs are still moving forward.
They have been advancing. They're being supported by tank and artillery fire. A number of mortars have landed in the town itself, but currently they're still more than a kilometer away.
Are there planes in the area?
We have asked for NATO air presence to deter the attack by the Bosnian Serb army, and my understanding is air presence has been provided.
Paddy Ashton was in Sarajevo today meeting the Bosnian Prime Minister. Mr. Ashton came in through the tunnel that is their only link with the outside world, and he thinks it's time for the UN openly to support the Bosnians.
The failure of will, the timidity, the indecision has led to chaos, confusion, farce, and a lot of lost lives. I think unless the UN can find for itself a role to play in the frontline areas, then the UN's authority looks to me to be catastrophically damaged.
The Bosnian Prime Minister no longer disguises his contempt for the UN.
Well, what are those resolutions then? What is safe haven? A joke? That seems to be a joke. So the Secretary General and the Security Council are a bunch of jokers.
British troops, members of the reaction force, were arriving in Croatia today, but it will take time for them to get into the field, and the British government still hasn't decided what to do next.
Everything that we do from now on must be realistic. It must have a good chance of success. We are prepared to consider a wide range of options. And today the military chiefs of France, Britain and the United States are meeting to see what those options may be.
Bosnian government sources say the UN is already discussing a number of ways of opening a secure supply route across Mount Igman. One option, called Igman Light, would involve the aggressive defense of aid convoys and could be put into action quite quickly. The second option, called Igman Heavy, would require at least a month's preparation. They'd have to lay mines, build defenses, and deploy heavy weapons. There'll need to be more troops as well, a lot more. Blue-helmeted French UN soldiers have been practicing self-defense with their mortars. If the UN is to regain any credibility here, combat soldiers will have to do this for real. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, Sarajevo.
UN officials have begun interviewing refugees who have been forced out of the former Muslim enclave of Srebrenica. A UN spokesman said that although they were unable to confirm allegations of rape and murder committed by the Bosnian Serbs, they did believe many of the claims. About 23,000 people driven from Srebrenica have now arrived in Tuzla, within Bosnian government territory. There's increasing concern for thousands of civilians who haven't yet been traced.
The warning siren sounded over Tuzla this morning, a reminder that even here no one is safe from Serb guns. Most of the refugees have now been moved out to surrounding villages. In this primary school, the pupils have been cleared to make way for 700 women and children. As the days go by, more and more tragic stories emerge. This old woman, who wouldn't tell us her name, watched her son being taken away by Serb soldiers. The only reminder she has of him now is her grandson, whom she smuggled out. She is bitter at the behavior of the UN.
UNPROFOR tricked us all. They didn't protect us. They were cooperating with the Serbs. They told us to surrender and said they were taking us to a safe place. But when we arrived, they handed their weapons to the Serbs.
The UN is now convinced that thousands of women and children as well as men are being held back by the Serbs. All requests to see them have been refused.
This is a major crime, forbidding the access even to the Red Cross or the International Red Cross. Something absolutely unacceptable.
The blankets and shelters are all in place, but the mass exodus of last week has mysteriously dried up. The Serb front line is just over these hills, and this is the only road that any refugees from Srebrenica can come down. But as you can see, it's ominously quiet. Not a single refugee has passed this way for more than 36 hours. So once again, the UN is having to wait for Serb permission. It could be a long time coming. Tom Carver, BBC News, Tuzla.
And the meeting of the Western Allies is just getting underway in London. French and American military chiefs arrived at the Ministry of Defence to meet their British counterparts in Whitehall a few moments ago. And our defence correspondent, Mark Leahy, is there. Mark, Malcolm Rifkin said earlier today that the UK was very willing, quote, to consider any realistic military proposals. What are they trying to hammer out this evening?
Well, there's various options, but I think the main one that they're going to be looking at is whether they can sensibly reinforce Gorazde and also what can be done about Sarajevo. I think Sarajevo is relatively uncontroversial in the fact that I think both the French and the British can agree that perhaps they should be opening up the route into Igman, Mount Igman, into the town to ensure that supplies can get through easily. So that's a simple one. It's Gorazde, which is a much harder and tougher nut to crack because it's an enclave well out in Serb territory. So that's the one the intense discussion will be about.
Indeed, Mark, the French have said that they are keen to use force to protect Gorazde. How likely is that to happen?
Well, I think that's still very much on the back burner in the sense that the British have said in principle they're happy to support going into Gorazde. After all, it's their troops that are there. But is it practical? How do you get them there? How do you supply them when they are there? What kind of a role will they have? Will they just defend themselves or will they fight for the enclave? These are all practical issues, and also the Americans have a role. What about getting the troops there with American helicopters? Because they're the only ones who've got enough helicopters close by. So if the Americans don't help, it won't happen. So these are very practical issues which they've really got to sort out.
Mark, very briefly, can we expect a declaration, some conclusions this evening?
No, the idea is not to produce a communique, it's to see if they can find some genuine practical options that they can present to ministers. That's what they'll do, and I think then the decisions will filter out over the next few days.
Mark, thanks very much indeed. Iraq has released 2 Americans who have been held in jail in Baghdad for the past 4 months. They'd been sentenced to 8 years after being convicted of entering the country illegally from Kuwait. The 2 men said they'd strayed across the border by mistake.
The 2 men who work for US defense contractors were arrested inside Iraq in March. They claim they were visiting friends at a United Nations post in northern Kuwait and had mistakenly crossed this sensitive border. But an Iraqi court didn't believe David Daliberti and William Barloon and jailed them for 8 years. But after serving 114 days, Saddam Hussein has surprised everyone by granting them a pardon. He was responding to a visit by an American congressman. He told Saddam he'd brought with him a humanitarian plea from President Clinton, the US Congress and the American people. Warren Christopher, the American Secretary of State, said Saddam hadn't been given any concessions to get the men released and that sanctions against Iraq would remain.
You know, it's very hard to probe the mind of Saddam Hussein. It's a very difficult exercise. Perhaps he was trying to court some international favor. But in my experience in these things, there comes a point at which the disadvantages of keeping them outweigh the disadvantages of releasing them.
The wives of the two Americans have spent the past 4 months campaigning to get them freed. Both men will leave for home tomorrow, but are now said to be relaxing in Baghdad, eating pizza and drinking champagne. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News.
Suggested cutbacks in the size of the Royal Ulster Constabulary have been deferred because of the recent unrest. The chairman of the police authority said the riots after the release of Private Lee Clegg and the confrontations at Orange parades meant it was too early to consider any cuts.
A marked police car on the streets of Northern Ireland, something that would have been unthinkable during the years of violence when such a vehicle would have been the target of terrorists. The peace process has allowed the RUC to begin to patrol like other forces in the United Kingdom. Street violence in West Belfast following the release of Private Lee Clegg, a return to the old ways for nationalist demonstrators and the police, who are back patrolling in armoured Land Rovers and wearing flak jackets. The violence in Portadown during the lengthy standoff with Orangemen has ensured there'll be no headlong rush to reduce police numbers at a time when they've been severely stretched. The thinking now is that a decision on the correct size of the RUC can't be made until the issues which divide the society have been addressed. The police authority says it needs to maintain current police numbers in order to deal with outbreaks of public disorder. But it insists this doesn't conflict with moves towards community policing almost a year into the ceasefires. Peter Hunt, BBC News, at RUC headquarters in Belfast.
2 IRA prisoners have started a so-called dirty protest at Whitemoor Jail in Cambridgeshire. The prison service says the men have smeared their cell walls with excrement and will only wear blankets. They're protesting at conditions in the jail. Last year, armed IRA prisoners staged a breakout from Whitemoor, prompting the introduction of a tighter security regime. The Labour leader, Tony Blair, has again defended his decision to attend a private media conference organised by Rupert Murdoch, who publishes The Times and The Sun, papers normally hostile to Labour. Speaking on Australian television, Mr Blair said it was important to have dialogue with any news organisation. He's also had his first meeting with the Australian Prime Minister Paul Keating.
There's been a fair amount of coverage here in Tony Blair's visit from a media which sees parallels in his relationship with Rupert Murdoch and that enjoyed by their Labour Prime Minister Paul Keating. Mr Blair has made no attempt to play down the importance he attaches to the Murdoch conference.
I'm not interested in the Labour Party as a perpetual party of protest. I want it in government. This dialogue is important to have, whether it's with Mr Murdoch's corporation or with other big news corporations.
Mr Keating is joining Mr Blair for the conference. They met up at Cairns Airport, from where they were ultimately setting off to join Mr Murdoch and others at an island hired for the event. But first, Mr Keating explained what he expected from the Murdoch press in Australia.
I think all Labour parties ever ask for, and I'm sure this is the case for the British Labour Party, is equality of treatment, the chance to disseminate one's message, nothing more, nothing less.
And journalists have been told that Mr Blair regards his speech tomorrow as the most wide-ranging since last year's party conference.
Our key message, and the message that I will be delivering in the speech that I'll be making tomorrow, is that we live now in a world of massive economic, technological and social change, and it is the left-of-centre parties that are best able to cope with that world of change because we are willing to plan and invest and organise our societies in order to cope with that.
And then it was off to the privacy of the conference, where Mr Blair will make a speech which is more a comprehensive restatement of well-known themes, but written in a way which should strike some chords for the selected audience. In his speech tomorrow, Mr Blair will be targeting editors and wider voters attracted by Thatcherism in the 1980s. He'll argue that it's Labour which now has a radical anti-establishment agenda, different in substance, but similar in style to the Thatcher era. Steve Richards, BBC News, Cairns.
And Labour is to press for a common statement from the Chancellor in response to the Greenbury report on directors' pay. Sir Richard Greenbury's recommendations, leaked ahead of tomorrow's publication, call for changes in their options are taxed. Labour says this will force a U-turn by the Chancellor, who's defended the current arrangements. The Indian government and Western diplomats are now in direct contact with the Muslim separatists who've kidnapped 5 foreign tourists in Kashmir. The militants are threatening to kill the men unless 20 Kashmiri prisoners are freed from jail by the Indian government. Yesterday, the separatists extended their deadline until Monday.
A routine army operation in Srinagar this week. Soldiers surround the area and take men from their homes in the middle of the night. They search the houses and parade suspects in front of informers hidden from sight. Atrocities committed by the Indian security forces in more than 5 years of conflict are the focus of the militants' latest message to the media. A new photograph of the 5 men shows them high in the Himalayan snows. They are being threatened, but the threat recedes as the deadline is extended and the militants play for time. It is now clear that the militants have 2 motives for holding the hostages: to give publicity to their cause and to show they have control of the mountains. Pahalgam, the last stop in the mountains before the trekking trails, is now a ghost town. Foreign tourists are banned from coming here, and new posters from the militants warn locals against helping the big Hindu pilgrimage, which is due to come through here soon. David Loyne, BBC News in Kashmir.
90,000 spectators witnessed an English victory at the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. Johnny Herbert was able to celebrate his first ever Formula One success when last year's winner, Damon Hill, was involved in a controversial collision with the world champion Michael Schumacher, some 16 laps from the end of the race.
The pre-race antagonism between Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher had been sharp enough, but what developed after Silverstone's green light was truly spiky. An opening to Hill's advantage as his front row position was consolidated by the red Ferrari of Jean Alesi, bursting through from 6th on the grid to go 2nd ahead of Schumacher. For 17 laps, Hill increased his lead over the rest, with Alesi blocking Schumacher's way. But then, in a race where there was precious little overtaking on the track, the first series of pit stops jumbled the order. Hill followed Alesi in for tyres and fuel, allowing Schumacher a lead that he held until the halfway stage and his solitary stop. That, in turn, restored Hill's lead, but in the to and fro of pit lane strategy, it was Schumacher who led Hill narrowly as they entered the last third of the race. And then it happened. Hill's world went into a spin as he tried to press the world champion on the inside, saw he couldn't make it, but braked too late. They'd done it before in Australia last season when Schumacher clinched the championship, but this, given the recriminations afterwards, seemed just as vital.
It was completely unnecessary, in my view, what Damon has done there. There was no room for him to go there. He came from nowhere. I don't see the sense of doing things like this, even in front of your home crowd.
I thought I saw an opportunity that I could take advantage of. Michael is a harder man to pass than that. And we had an accident, and I would describe it as a racing accident.
The rest could have been anticlimax, but wasn't, since David Coulthard then overtook Johnny Herbert for the lead, only to have it removed by a 10-second penalty. And Mark Blundell survived another crash, this time with Rubens Barrichello, to limp on for a 5th place, which left Herbert with his first Grand Prix win in 71 attempts. Reward at last for his recovery from injuries 6 years ago.
It's been very, very hard, and as I say, my wife has been supportive the whole way through, way back since the accident. So it's a fantastic day, and especially at Silverstone.
So a popular but unexpected British victory that leaves championship leader Schumacher still 11 points clear of Hill. Rob Bonnet, BBC News.
And you can see highlights from the Grand Prix at 7:10 on BBC Two. But that's it for now from the newsroom. The main news here on BBC One is at 5 to 10.
On BBC Two in 20 minutes, Brian Walden reconsiders the career and reputation of post-war Prime Minister Clement Attlee.
Good evening. There's been some thundery weather brewing up so far during today, and if we take a look on the radar, we can see that certainly an awful lot of rain showing on the radar here, a distinct forward line of it in fact, marching its way up across Northern Ireland in the last few hours, and some pretty heavy bursts of rain in that. Also some quite sharp and even thundery showers across central and southern areas of England and Wales. Further northeast, it's a fairly fine end to the day for most regions, but there will be further showers and that thundery weather moving up across parts of southwest Scotland, eventually up into the northwest of Scotland later in the night, and for a time, well, anywhere could still see one of those showers overnight. Pretty light breezes for most of us, another warmish night in the south, but really quite fresher up across the north of Scotland. And then as we look ahead to tomorrow, well, one area of cloud array moving away, another moving in, and between we'll see more showers developing. Any brighter weather is likely in the east during the morning, the showers gathering by the middle of the day, the heavier ones more likely in the north for Monday rather than the south, and cloudier skies bringing more persistent rain across Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest later on in the daytime. Probably in fact into the evening. Freshening winds then, the warmest weather again, likely in the eastern areas of England, probably up to around 23. Bye-bye.
And you can see highlights from the Grand Prix at 7:10 on BBC Two. But that's it for now from the newsroom. The main news here on BBC One is at 5 to 10.
On BBC Two in 20 minutes, Brian Walden reconsiders the career and reputation of post-war Prime Minister Clement Attlee.
Good evening. There's been some thundery weather brewing up so far during today, and if we take a look on the radar we can see that certainly an awful lot of rain showing on the radar here, a distinct forward line of it in fact marching its way up across Northern Ireland in the last few hours, and some pretty heavy bursts of rain in that. Also some quite sharp and even thundery showers across central and southern areas of England and Wales. Further northeast, it's a fairly fine end to the day for most regions, but there will be further showers and that thundery weather moving up across parts of southwest Scotland, eventually up into the northwest of Scotland later in the night, and for a time, well, anywhere could still see one of those showers overnight. Pretty light breezes for most of us, another warmish night in the south, but really quite fresher up across the north of Scotland. And then as we look ahead to tomorrow, well, one area of cloud array moving away, another moving in, and between we'll see more showers developing. Any brighter weather is likely in the east during the morning, the showers gathering by the middle of the day, the heavier ones more likely in the north for Monday rather than the south, and cloudier skies bringing more persistent rain across Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest later on in the daytime. Probably in fact into the evening. Freshening winds then, the warmest weather again, likely in the eastern areas of England, probably up to around 23. Bye-bye.
Good evening. A man has been charged with murdering his wife and two stepsons at their 3 bedrooms of the house in Hemsby near Great Yarmouth on Friday night.
Police went to the house in a quiet cul-de-sac after arresting 37-year-old Martin Hughes in Panksworth, 10 miles away. The bodies of his wife, Julie Brackon Hughes, and two stepsons, 7-year-old James and Matthew, who was 6, were found in their bedrooms. Post-mortem examinations showed they died from asphyxia. Mr. Hughes has been remanded in custody and is due to appear before Great Yarmouth magistrates tomorrow.
2 prisoners at Whitemoor Jail in Cambridgeshire have begun a so-called dirty protest, spreading excrement over cell walls. Both have been transferred to a segregation unit. The Prison Officers Association at the jail says it's in protest at the strict regime imposed in the Special Secure Unit after last year's IRA breakout. Other reports suggest it's an attempt to put pressure on the government to transfer Republican prisoners to Northern Ireland. Residents of the Welland estate in Peterborough are welcoming the opening of a new play centre for children as part of a regeneration programme for the area. The Charterist Centre has been completely overhauled after an arson attack 2 years ago.
Yeah, cool, guys. I'm going to the monkey bar.
A place to socialise and to let off steam. The Charterist drop-in play centre for young people aged 5 to 14 is a much-needed boost to morale for an estate associated for the past 8 months with the death of Ricky Neve, who was found strangled near his home. His mother, Ruth Neve, is in custody charged with his murder.
We've gone through a dreadful 8 months on the estate where people have felt that everybody was against them, and of course we had a massive media influx into the estate which gave the place a dreadful name, and it's not as bad as that.
Well, I mean, there wasn't much here from before, and they're really excited that there's going to be a new building with loads of new stuff.
At the centre they could paint, play snooker or pool. They have music on in there.
The centre's reopening is all part of a positive plan by Peterborough City Council and other agencies to create a safer, more pleasant environment. And this play centre isn't the only thing being planned for the development of the Welland Estate. Tomorrow there's going to be the opening of a youth centre as well. Anne Bowden, Look East on the Welland Estate in Peterborough.
Now, Wimbledon might have finished for another year, but that isn't an excuse for packing away your tennis gear. They're heading a campaign to try to get more players out on the court.
Riding in on the latest stage of his countrywide tour, the former British seed and Norfolk player Chris Bailey. He and the Northampton rugby star Tim Rodbear are just two of the celebrities backing this project, which the organisers, rather modestly, claim to be Britain's biggest ever free coaching tour. The aim? To promote interest in tennis and try to cultivate some future British hopefuls.
We have lacked a role model, somebody that really creates a huge interest in the game, somebody like a Linford Christie in athletics. Maybe some of the children here today won't have picked up a tennis racket, and they might be very good. And there are some coaches here today who will spot them and hopefully will help them on their way if they are.
As well as here in Norwich, Chris and Tim can add Ipswich and Cambridge to the list of places visited today. By next weekend, it's hoped 25,000 people will have been coached, perhaps to future success.
An Essex kite team is flying high after coming second in the British Championships. The Skydance team from Chelmsford have now earned themselves a place in the European Championships in Germany. And if they do well there, they could go through to the World Championships. And of course, congratulations to Essex boy Johnny Herbert, who won the British Grand Prix at Silverstone this afternoon. Let's look at the weather, and there will be showers, some heavy for a time, overnight, and isolated ones tomorrow. There will be sunny intervals tomorrow, pushing the temperature up to 23 Celsius, 73 Fahrenheit. That's it from us tonight. Good night.
Sunday night on BBC One, and at 7...
The word divorce has never been mentioned in this family.
No.
Something your father might want, even if I don't.
At 7:30, have they got the answer?
No.
At 8...
You mean to tell me you didn't realise this man was dead?
Well, people don't talk that much to them. Well, look, I'm just delivering a tray, right? If the guest isn't singing, "Oh, what a beautiful morning," I don't immediately think, "Oh, there's another one snuffed it in the night."
At 8:35, it's Sharon's lucky night.
Oh, you really know how to have a good time, didn't you?
I used to. And I could do with being reminded.
And at 9:05...
Eddie, I just want you to know that if I was the kind of guy who did that kind of thing, I'd be hugging you now.
A brand new series of the Preston Front. Sunday night on BBC One.
Hymns, history and some great songs of praise now on BBC One from St Paul's Cathedral.
Tonight's programme, choir boy Anthony Way gives me a few tips.